Across the galaxy, there exists a universal truth that every sentient species has discovered: survival requires protection. Every creature, from the smallest insect-like beings on Zirion Prime to the mighty crystalline entities of the void reaches, shares one fundamental instinct: when they rest, they must shield themselves from the dangers that lurk in darkness. Every species, that is, except one. When the Galactic Council first encountered humans, they dismissed them as another primitive species destined for extinction. How could any creature survive without the basic instinct of protection during their most vulnerable state? How could they close their eyes in slumber, exposed and defenseless, trusting in nothing but empty air? But humans didn't just survive, they thrived. And now, as the galaxy burns under the invasion of an ancient evil that feeds on fear itself, the universe is about to discover that sometimes the greatest strength comes from the most impossible vulnerability. This is the story of how humanity's strangest trait became their greatest weapon, witnessed through the eyes of an alien girl who couldn't believe what she was seeing when she first watched a human sleep without cover, without fear, without the protective barriers that every other species in the galaxy considered essential for survival. Zara's three eyes blinked in rapid succession as she pressed herself against the observation chamber's reinforced wall. Her scaled hands trembled slightly as she adjusted the viewing scope for the 100th time in the past hour. Through the transparent barrier, she watched the human prisoner with growing confusion and fascination. The creature lay on the simple metal platform they had provided as a sleeping surface. No protective shell. No energy barrier. No defensive posture whatsoever. The human simply rested on his back, arms at his sides, breathing slowly and steadily. His chest rose and fell with a rhythm that seemed almost peaceful, completely at odds with his situation as a captive aboard a Zephyrian research vessel. This cannot be natural behavior, Zara whispered to herself, her translator collar converting her native clicks and whistles into standard galactic common. She had been studying xenobiology for 15 cycles, and never in her academic career had she encountered anything so fundamentally wrong. Commander Thex approached from behind, his heavy footsteps announcing his presence long before his shadow fell across her workstation. Still observing the human, research specialist Zara? She turned toward her superior, her neck frills displaying the purple hues of scientific excitement mixed with concern. Commander, I have documented 17 different sleep cycles for this specimen. Each time, the result is identical. He exhibits no protective behaviors whatsoever. Thex's mandibles clicked dismissively. Perhaps the creature is defective. Brain damage from the capture process, maybe. No sir, Zara replied, pulling up holographic displays of her data. All neural scans show normal activity patterns. Physical examinations reveal no abnormalities. This human appears to be in perfect health. Yet he consistently demonstrates behavior that should result in immediate death on any world in the galaxy. The Zephyrian commander studied the sleeping human with professional detachment. His own species required specialized sleep chambers that could be sealed and pressurized, equipped with multiple layers of defensive systems. Even here, aboard their own ship in the safety of deep space, Thex would never consider resting without proper protection. What does your research indicate about human homeworld conditions? He asked. Zara manipulated the holographic interface, bringing up atmospheric and environmental data. Planet Earth appears surprisingly hostile, Commander. Multiple apex predators, unstable weather patterns, geological activity, and atmospheric composition that would be toxic to most species we have encountered. Yet humans evolved as persistence hunters who traveled vast distances across open terrain. Persistence hunters? They would chase prey for days, sometimes weeks, across open ground. While other predators relied on speed or strength or stealth, humans simply refused to stop. They would follow their target until it collapsed from exhaustion. Zara paused, studying the peaceful figure through the barrier. But this presents an even greater puzzle. How did they rest during these hunts? How did they sleep in hostile territory without protection? Through the observation window, the human stirred slightly. Zara immediately activated the recording equipment, documenting every micro-movement. The creature's eyes opened slowly, and he sat up on the platform with movements that seemed remarkably fluid for a creature that had been completely unconscious moments before. Fascinating, she breathed. Look at his alert response time, Commander. From deep sleep to full awareness in less than 3 seconds. The human looked around the chamber, his gaze eventually settling on the observation window. Though the barrier was one-way transparent, something about his expression suggested he knew he was being watched. He stood and approached the wall, placing one hand flat against the surface. Can it see us? Thex asked. Impossible. The barrier is configured for one-way observation. But, even as she said it, Zara felt uncertain. The human's eyes seemed to look directly at her, and she found herself taking an involuntary step backward. The human spoke, though his words were unfamiliar. The ship's universal translator processed the sounds, converting them to galactic common. I know you're watching. My name is Marcus Chen. I'd like to talk. Thex's exoskeleton rattled with surprise. It knows we are here. How? Zara was already running diagnostics on their observation equipment. Everything showed normal operation, but the human continued to stare directly at their position. Perhaps their sensory capabilities are more advanced than we realized. Marcus stepped back from the wall and sat cross-legged on the floor. I understand you're probably scientists. I'm a xenobiologist myself, actually. From the University of New Geneva. I was part of the Deep Space Survey mission that your people intercepted. He is claiming to be a scientist? Thex's translator conveyed his disbelief through inflection algorithms. If true, it would explain his calm behavior, Zara mused. Scientific curiosity might override fear responses. Marcus continued speaking, apparently addressing the wall. I assume you're studying human physiology and behavior. I'd be happy to answer questions if you're willing to make this a collaborative effort rather than a one-sided examination. Zara looked at Commander Thex. Sir, this could provide unprecedented research opportunities. Direct communication with the subject could yield far more data than passive observation. Thex considered for a long moment, his mandibles working silently. Very well. Establish communication protocols. But, maintain all safety barriers. Zara activated the communication array, allowing her voice to transmit into the holding chamber. Human designation Marcus Chen, this is Research Specialist Zara of the Zephyrian Deep Space Research Division. You claim to be a scientist? Marcus smiled, an expression that displayed his teeth in what Zara had learned was not actually a threat display among humans. Yes. Xenobiology with a focus on evolutionary adaptation. I take it you're studying how different species have evolved sleep behaviors? How did you know that? Because every species we've encountered has some form of protected sleep. Shells, burrows, energy fields, group defense patterns. But, you've been watching me sleep without any protection at all. From an alien perspective, that would be the most immediately obvious thing to study about humans. Zara's frills fluttered with excitement. Precisely correct. Your species appears to lack all evolutionary protective adaptations for the sleep state. This should result in extinction through predation pressure. But, it didn't, Marcus said simply. We became the apex predators instead. The statement hung in the air like a challenge. Commander Thex leaned closer to the communication array. Human, you are a relatively small creature with no natural weapons, minimal physical strength, and defensive capabilities that appear completely absent. How do you claim apex predator status? Marcus stood and moved to the center of the chamber. May I demonstrate something? I promise it's not an escape attempt. Zara looked to Thex, who gave a curt nod. Proceed. Marcus lay down on the floor, not on the sleeping platform, but on the cold metal deck. He closed his eyes and, within moments, appeared to be asleep. Zara checked her instruments, confirming that his brainwave patterns matched those she had recorded during his previous sleep cycles. He is actually sleeping, she reported. On an unfamiliar surface, in captivity, under observation, he has achieved genuine sleep state in under 60 seconds. Impossible, Thex muttered. After exactly 10 minutes, Marcus opened his eyes and sat up. Microsleep, he explained. Humans can achieve restorative sleep in very short periods when necessary. We can sleep anywhere, under almost any conditions, and wake immediately when needed. Zara's hands moved rapidly across her data interfaces, recording everything. This contradicts all known evolutionary theory. Vulnerable sleep states should select against such behavior. Unless, Marcus said, standing and brushing off his clothes, the vulnerability is actually a strength. Explain. Marcus walked to the observation wall again. Every other species builds defenses around their sleep because they fear predators. But humans learned something different. We learned that the best defense isn't hiding from predators. It's making sure nothing wants to hunt you in the first place. Thex's mandibles clicked rapidly, a sign of agitation. Meaningless philosophical statements. Predators hunt vulnerable prey. This is universal law. Is it? Marcus asked. Tell me, Commander Thex, what does your species do when you encounter something that shows no fear? The question caught the Zephyrian off guard. We assess threat levels and respond accordingly. And if that something is completely relaxed, totally unafraid, sleeping peacefully in the open? A long pause. We would investigate cautiously. Exactly. Because if a creature is sleeping unprotected in dangerous territory, either it's stupid and easy prey, or it's so dangerous that nothing else in the area poses a threat to it. Marcus smiled again. And humans have been proving which one we are for about 50,000 years. Zara felt her understanding of evolutionary theory shifting like tectonic plates. You're suggesting that fearless sleep behavior serves as a threat display? Not exactly a threat display. More like a statement of fact. When a human sleeps in the open, we're saying that we're not worried about anything in the immediate area. And we're usually right. Commander Thex stepped closer to the communication array. Human Marcus Chen, your species was easily captured by our research teams. Your ship's crew offered minimal resistance. How do you reconcile this with your claims? Marcus's expression grew more serious. Because you're not predators, Commander. You're scientists. We recognized the research protocols and how you approached our ship. When we encounter scientists, we cooperate. When we encounter threats. He paused meaningfully. Well, that tends to go very differently. You are claiming your species has different behavioral patterns for different types of contact? All species do, don't they? You respond differently to potential mates than to predators than to prey than to neutral encounters. Humans are just very good at rapidly categorizing new situations and responding appropriately. Zara pulled up galactic contact records. Reviewing first contact reports between humans and other species. Encounters with hostile forces show dramatically different outcomes than encounters with peaceful civilizations. Exactly, Marcus said. We sleep peacefully when we feel safe, and we fight without fear when we don't. The same evolutionary trait that allows us to rest unprotected also allows us to face any threat without hesitation. The implications were staggering. Zara's research had focused on the sleeping behavior as an isolated phenomenon, but Marcus was describing it as part of a larger evolutionary strategy. She thought about the human military records they had accessed, stories of humans fighting against impossible odds, of soldiers who seemed to feel no fear in the face of certain death. Your military effectiveness ratings are significantly higher than your technological advancement would suggest, she said slowly. Because fear is the greatest tactical limitation most species face, Marcus confirmed. When you're not afraid of dying, you make very different strategic choices. Commander Thex was silent for a long moment. Human, are you telling us that your species' apparent vulnerability is actually a form of psychological warfare? Not warfare, exactly. More like honest communication. When a human sleeps unprotected, we're telling everything nearby that we're not afraid of them. Sometimes that's because we're in a safe place. Sometimes it's because we're the most dangerous thing in the area. Marcus shrugged casually. Either way, it tends to work out. Zara realized that her entire research framework had been based on incorrect assumptions. She had been studying what appeared to be a dangerous evolutionary weakness, when in reality she was documenting one of the most sophisticated survival strategies she had ever encountered. "I need to completely restructure my research approach," she said to Thex. "As do we all, research specialist. As do we all." But, even as she said it, Zara had the growing feeling that they were still missing something crucial about human nature. The fearless sleep was just the beginning. If humans could sleep peacefully in hostile territory and wake ready for battle in seconds, what other seemingly impossible traits had their species developed? Outside the ship, deep space stretched endlessly in all directions. And, somewhere in that vast darkness, ancient things were stirring that would soon test every theory about human nature that the galaxy had developed. 3 days after first contact with Marcus Chen, the research vessel Profound Inquiry received a priority transmission that changed everything. Zara was in the middle of conducting behavioral tests with the human when alarms began blaring throughout the ship. The emergency lighting cast everything in a harsh red glow as Commander Thex's voice echoed through the communication systems. "All personnel to emergency stations. We have received a Class Alpha priority transmission from Galactic Council Central Command." Zara looked through the observation barrier at Marcus, who had immediately stood and moved to the center of his chamber. His posture had changed completely from the relaxed scientist she had been speaking with moments before. Now he looked like a soldier waiting for orders. "Something's wrong," Marcus said through the communication array. "That alarm pattern indicates an existential threat level emergency." Zara's frills rippled with surprise. "How could you possibly know our alarm classifications?" "Pattern recognition. Every military organization in the galaxy uses similar escalation protocols. That sequence means someone important is very scared of something very dangerous." Marcus approached the observation wall. "Zara, if this is what I think it is, you're going to need human help." Before she could respond, Commander Thex's voice came over her personal communication device. "Research Specialist Zara, report to the command center immediately. Bring the human." The short journey through the ship's corridors felt surreal. Zara had never seen Marcus outside the observation chamber before. He moved with fluid grace through spaces designed for Zephyrian physiology, adapting instantly to the different ceiling heights and gravity variations. Other crew members they passed stopped to stare at the strange sight of an unconstrained alien walking freely among them. "Your ship's artificial gravity is set to about 0.8 standard," Marcus commented casually. "Comfortable for most species, but it would give humans a slight advantage in any physical confrontation." "Why are you telling me this?" "Because if I'm right about what's happening, tactical information sharing is about to become very important." The command center was a hive of activity when they arrived. Holographic displays showed star charts, communication networks, and what appeared to be fleet movements throughout the sector. Commander Thex stood at the center of it all, his usually calm demeanor replaced by visible agitation. "Research Specialist Zara, your human subject claimed familiarity with military protocols. Can he analyze tactical data?" Marcus stepped forward before Zara could answer. "Commander, show me what you've got." Thex gestured to the main display, which showed a three-dimensional representation of the galaxy. Large sections were highlighted in red, with expanding circular patterns that looked ominously like infection vectors. 15 hours ago, the Galactic Council lost contact with the Vega sector colonies. Automated distress beacons indicated massive casualties before communications were completely severed. Similar reports have come from 12 other sectors in the past 6 hours. Marcus studied the display with intense concentration. Pattern analysis suggests coordinated attacks, but the expansion rate is too fast for conventional military forces. "What's the nature of the attacking force?" "Unknown," Thex admitted. "No ships detected on long-range sensors. No energy weapon signatures. No conventional attack patterns at all. Survivors? None that have been able to communicate coherently. The few escape pods that have been recovered contained only." Thex paused, his mandibles working uncertainly. "The occupants appear to have died from extreme psychological trauma. No physical injuries, but complete nervous system collapse." Zara watched Marcus's expression grow increasingly grim. "Commander, I need you to play any available recordings from the attack sites." Thex activated the audio systems, and the command center filled with the sounds of terror. Screaming voices in a dozen different languages, all conveying the same desperate fear. But, underneath the obvious panic, there was something else. A sound that seemed to exist at the very edge of perception, something that made Zara's scales crawl with instinctive dread. Marcus listened for exactly 30 seconds before holding up his hand. "Turn it off." The command center fell silent. Everyone was staring at the human, waiting for his analysis. "They're called dread feeders," Marcus said quietly. "We've encountered them before." The statement hit the command center like a physical blow. Thex's exoskeleton rattled as he stepped closer to Marcus. "Impossible. This is the first documented appearance of this threat in galactic history." "No, it isn't." Marcus gestured to the display. "About 800 years ago, Earth's deep space monitoring stations detected the same psychological attack signatures from a distant galaxy. We tracked the expansion pattern until it suddenly stopped. Complete cessation of all activity." "What stopped them?" Marcus met the commander's gaze directly. "We did." The silence stretched uncomfortably long. Finally, Zara found her voice. "Human Marcus, are you claiming that your species has previously encountered and defeated these entities?" "Not just encountered. We destroyed them completely in that galaxy. It took 300 years and cost us about 40 billion people, but we eliminated every trace of their presence." Commander Thex's mandibles clicked rapidly. "The human is claiming his species fought an 800-year war against entities that are destroying our entire galactic civilization in a matter of hours." "Yes," Marcus said simply. "How?" Marcus walked to the tactical display and began manipulating the interface with surprising familiarity. "Because dread feeders have one critical weakness. They feed on fear. They exist by consuming the psychological energy generated by terror, panic, and helplessness. The more afraid their victims become, the stronger the feeders grow." He highlighted several areas on the galactic map. "Look at the expansion pattern. They're not attacking randomly. They're targeting population centers with the highest fear responses first. The attacks are designed to generate maximum psychological trauma, which feeds them and makes them powerful enough to expand to the next target." Zara studied the data with growing understanding. A psychological predator that grows stronger by terrorizing its prey. Exactly. Which is why conventional military responses fail so catastrophically. The more afraid your forces become, the more powerful your enemy gets. Fear makes them nearly invincible. Marcus paused, looking around the command center at all the worried faces. "But humans have a significant advantage in this type of warfare." "Which is?" "We don't stay afraid." Commander Thex's translator conveyed his skepticism clearly. "Human, you are claiming your species does not experience fear?" "No, we experience fear. But we don't let it control us." Marcus returned to the display, pulling up population density charts. "When humans encounter something terrifying, we have a psychological response that other species apparently lack. We get angry." "Anger?" "Fear mixed with aggression. When humans are afraid, we don't just run or hide. We turn that fear into fury and we attack the source of the threat." Marcus's expression grew cold. Dread feeders expect their victims to become more afraid as the situation gets worse. But humans become more dangerous. Zara thought about the sleeping behavior she had been studying. The same psychological framework that allowed humans to rest unprotected in hostile territory also allowed them to transform fear into aggression. "Your species weaponizes the fight or flight response." "Something like that. When a dread feeder tries to feed on human fear, it gets a massive surge of aggressive energy instead. They can't process it properly. It's like psychological poison to them." Commander Thex was studying troop movement reports. "Human Marcus, assuming your analysis is correct, how do we implement this knowledge?" Our fleets are composed of multiple species, none of which share this human psychological trait. Marcus was quiet for a moment, clearly thinking through the tactical implications. You need human forces integrated into every defensive position. Not leading the charges, but present in sufficient numbers to disrupt the feeder's energy consumption pattern. We do not have human military forces in this sector. No, but you have human civilian populations on most major colony worlds. Scientists, traders, explorers. If we can organize them properly. You're suggesting we arm civilian populations and ask them to fight entities that have destroyed professional military forces throughout the galaxy? Marcus smiled, and once again Zara was struck by how the expression of bared teeth somehow conveyed confidence rather than aggression. Commander, you're thinking about this wrong. We're not asking civilians to become soldiers. We're asking humans to be human. He manipulated the display to show communication networks. Send a message to every human population in the threatened sectors. Tell them exactly what they're facing. Explain that the enemy feeds on fear and becomes stronger when people panic. Then, tell them that human psychological responses can disrupt the feeding process. And then, what? Then, you stand back and watch 800 years of human evolutionary development do what it was designed to do. Zara felt a chill that had nothing to do with the ship's environmental systems. You're describing your species as if they were specifically evolved to fight this type of entity. Marcus looked at her directly, and, for the first time since she had been observing him, she saw something truly alien in his expression. Research specialist Zara, what do you think we were doing for the 300 years we were fighting them in that distant galaxy? The implications hit her like a physical impact. Evolutionary pressure. Natural selection operating at species level. Every human generation that survived the war was selected for psychological traits that made them more effective against fear-feeding entities. Marcus turned back to Commander Thex. We didn't just defeat the dread feeders through superior tactics or technology. We evolved into something they couldn't feed on. And now they have found their way to this galaxy, Thex said grimly. Yes. But, this time, they're not facing species that have never encountered them before. This time, they're facing humans who have spent 8 centuries becoming something that turns their food source into poison. Marcus walked back to the tactical display. Commander, I need you to patch me through to human populations throughout this sector. I have a message for them. What kind of message? The kind that tells them it's time to stop sleeping peacefully and start reminding the universe why nothing hunts humans. Zara watched the easy confidence in Marcus's posture and realized that she was seeing something unprecedented in galactic history. A species that had fought an existential war for 3 centuries and emerged not just victorious, but fundamentally changed by the experience. The fearless sleep wasn't just an evolutionary quirk. It was a weapon that had been forged in cosmic fire. And now, as ancient nightmares emerged from the void between galaxies, the universe was about to discover what 800 years of human evolution had been preparing for. The war was coming to them, but humanity had been ready for a very long time. The message went out across 17 star systems in 43 languages, but Marcus insisted it be transmitted in human English first, with translations provided as secondary data streams. Zara monitored the communication arrays as the signal propagated through the galactic network, reaching human settlements from mining stations in asteroid belts to research colonies on distant worlds. Marcus had been very specific about the message content. No sugarcoating. No attempts to prevent panic. He wanted every human in the sector to understand exactly what they were facing, and, more importantly, what they were capable of. Citizens of human origin, the message began, this is an emergency alert regarding an entity classification designated as dread feeders. These entities consume psychological energy generated by fear and terror. They have eliminated all resistance in 12 sectors and are expanding toward our current positions. Marcus had insisted on including the tactical analysis that most galactic protocols would have classified as restricted information. He wanted humans to know that conventional military responses had failed, that entire fleets had been destroyed without firing a single effective shot, and that billions of beings had died in psychological collapse. Previous human encounters with these entities occurred approximately 800 years ago, the message continued. Human forces achieved total victory after 3 centuries of warfare. Current human psychological evolution makes us uniquely suited to disrupt dread feeder energy consumption patterns. Zara watched the response monitors as the message reached its targets. Most species would have shown immediate spikes in panic indicators, emergency evacuation requests, and general system-wide fear responses. But the human population responses were different. "Marcus," she called, "I'm seeing unusual patterns in the human settlement responses." Marcus approached her workstation, studying the data flowing across her displays. "What kind of patterns?" "Increased communication traffic, but not distress calls. Resource allocation shifts toward weapons manufacturing. And there are massive transportation movements, but not away from the threatened areas." "They're moving toward the danger zones," Marcus confirmed, reading the data with what appeared to be satisfaction. Commander Thex joined them at the monitoring station. "Human Marcus, your people appear to be exhibiting the opposite of expected self-preservation behaviors." "Expected by whom?" "By any rational analysis of threat response. When faced with an enemy that has destroyed professional military forces, civilian populations should evacuate to safer areas." Marcus shook his head. "Commander, you're still thinking about this wrong. Humans don't run from existential threats. We eliminate them." The communication systems activated as incoming messages began flooding their receivers. Responses from human settlements across the sector, but these weren't pleas for help or requests for evacuation transport. They were tactical coordination requests. "New Geneva Research Station requesting combat coordination protocols," one message read. "We have 47 researchers and support staff. Available weapons include mining charges, industrial cutting lasers, and improvised chemical weapons. Request target priorities and engagement strategies." "Asteroid Mining Complex 77 Alpha requesting fleet coordination," read another. "We have 12 heavy mining ships with modified drilling equipment. Ships are being retrofitted for combat operations. Request enemy movement vectors and strategic objectives." Message after message scrolled past, each one following the same pattern. Human settlements weren't asking to be rescued. They were asking how they could help with the fight. Zara's frills displayed deep purple confusion. They received information about an enemy that has destroyed entire star systems, and their response is to volunteer for combat operations? "Look at the resource allocation data," Marcus suggested. She pulled up the economic monitoring displays and felt her understanding of human psychology shift again. Across human settlements throughout the sector, industrial production had shifted toward weapons manufacturing. Food production facilities were converting to military rations. Civilian transport ships were being retrofitted for combat operations. "Your entire population is militarizing," she observed. "Not militarizing," Marcus corrected. "Activating." "Explain the difference." "Militarization is what happens when a peaceful population tries to become military. Activation is what happens when a warrior species remembers what it was built for." Commander Thex studied the tactical displays with growing amazement. "Human Marcus, your species is treating this as an opportunity rather than a threat." "Because it is an opportunity." Marcus's expression grew serious. "Commander, dread feeders are one of the few truly evil entities in the universe. They exist only to cause suffering and feed on pain. For 800 years, we've known they were still out there somewhere. Every human child grows up hearing stories about the Great War, about the victory our ancestors won, and about the possibility that someday we might have to fight them again." He gestured toward the incoming messages. "These aren't civilians responding to an unexpected threat. These are descendants of the survivors, and they've been waiting their entire lives for this chance." "Chance for what?" "To finish what our ancestors started." A priority message arrived from the human colony world of New Terra, and Commander Thex authorized it for immediate display. The face that appeared on their screen belonged to a middle-aged human woman with graying hair and calm, determined eyes. "This is Director Sarah Kim of New Terra Colony. We've received the alert about dread feeder activity in our sector. New Terra has a population of 800,000 humans and about 2 million beings of other species. We're organizing joint defense forces with emphasis on human psychological warfare capabilities. She paused, looking directly into the camera. To any galactic military forces receiving this transmission, be advised that New Terra is not requesting evacuation. We are establishing ourselves as a defensive fortress and requesting coordination with other resistance efforts. We have orbital manufacturing capabilities and can produce weapons and equipment for allied forces. The transmission continued with detailed tactical information about defensive preparations, resource availability, and strategic coordination offers. But what struck Zara most forcefully was the woman's tone. She spoke with the calm confidence of someone who was exactly where they wanted to be, doing exactly what they had been born to do. She's not afraid, Zara said quietly. None of them are, Marcus confirmed. That's the point. More messages arrived in rapid succession. Every human settlement in the sector was not only refusing evacuation but actively preparing for combat operations. Manufacturing centers were converting to weapons production. Agricultural worlds were organizing supply lines for extended warfare. Research stations were developing new technologies specifically designed for fighting entities that fed on psychological energy. This is unprecedented in galactic history, Commander Thex observed. An entire species population mobilizing for warfare within hours of receiving threat notification. Because we've been ready for 800 years, Marcus said simply. Zara pulled up the historical records Marcus had referenced, studying the data about humanity's previous war against the dread feeders. The numbers were staggering. 3 centuries of continuous warfare. 40 billion human casualties. Hundreds of worlds destroyed or abandoned. But the humans had never surrendered, never tried to negotiate, never sought peaceful coexistence. Your species fought for 300 years until you achieved total enemy annihilation, she said. Yes. Even after suffering casualties that should have resulted in species extinction. Yes. And, now, faced with the same enemy, your immediate response is to prepare for another 300-year war if necessary. Marcus looked at her directly. Research specialist Zara, do you understand what it means when a species spends 3 centuries in existential warfare? She thought about it carefully. Extreme evolutionary pressure. Only the most adaptable individuals survive to reproduce. Not just adaptable. The only humans who survived were the ones who could fight fear-feeding entities for their entire lives without breaking. Without losing hope. Without surrendering to despair. Marcus gestured toward the incoming messages. Every human alive today is descended from those survivors. Genetic selection for psychological warfare capabilities. Exactly. And, more than that. Cultural evolution. Every human child grows up learning the history, the tactics, the psychological techniques that won the first war. We don't just carry the genetic legacy of our ancestors. We carry their knowledge. Commander Thex was studying fleet movement patterns on his tactical displays. Human Marcus, our military analysts estimate that organized resistance against dread feeder forces would require coordinated efforts across hundreds of star systems, with sustained combat operations lasting decades or centuries. Sounds about right. Your species is volunteering for that level of commitment based on a single emergency transmission. Marcus smiled, and, once again Zara was struck by the predatory nature of the expression. Commander, my species has been waiting 800 years for this fight. We're not volunteering for a long war. We're volunteering to finish the last one. The communication arrays activated again as a new priority message arrived. This one came from the human homeworld itself, from Earth's Planetary Defense Coordination Center. The voice that spoke carried authority that resonated across light years. This is Admiral Rebecca Torres, speaking for Earth's United Defense Command. We have received reports of dread feeder activity in Sector 7. Be advised that human military forces are mobilizing for immediate deployment to all threatened areas. Zara checked the transmission lag. This message was sent 12 hours ago. before we even contacted human populations in this sector. Marcus nodded. They detected the dread feeder expansion pattern using our deep space monitoring networks. Earth has been tracking them since they first appeared in this galaxy. Admiral Torres continued her message. To all galactic forces and civilian populations, be advised that humanity is implementing Protocol 777. This authorization covers total war footing against dread feeder entities. Human forces will engage without restraint until complete enemy elimination is achieved. Protocol 777? Commander Thex asked. Total species mobilization for existential warfare, Marcus explained. Everything we have, everything we are, focused on eliminating the threat. It was established after the last war, in case the dread feeders ever returned. Your entire species has been planning for this specific situation for 8 centuries. Planning, preparing, evolving, and waiting. Marcus looked around the command center at all the amazed alien faces. Commander, you asked me earlier how humans achieved apex predator status despite our apparent physical limitations. Yes. This is how. When something threatens us, we don't hide or run or negotiate. We organize every resource our species possesses and we eliminate the threat completely. We don't fight to defend ourselves. We fight to make sure the threat never exists again. Zara studied the flood of incoming data from human settlements. Resource allocation, tactical coordination, technological development, strategic planning. An entire species shifting into warfare mode with terrifying efficiency. You're describing a level of unified species response that shouldn't be possible without centralized control structures. Who says there's no centralized control? Marcus asked. Every human carries the same cultural programming, the same historical knowledge, the same psychological evolution. We don't need someone to tell us what to do when dread feeders appear. We already know. The realization hit her like cold water. Your species has been functionally militarized for 800 years. Not militarized. Evolved. Marcus approached the tactical display showing dread feeder expansion patterns. They're about to discover what happens when a fear-feeding entity encounters a species that has spent 8 centuries evolving specifically to fight them. And what happens? Marcus's smile carried 800 years of accumulated human fury. They learn why the universe has apex predators. Outside the ship, in the vast darkness between stars, ancient nightmares were moving toward inhabited worlds. But, for the first time in galactic history, the prey was moving to meet them. The first engagement happened at the mining station Perseus 7, a small human outpost on the edge of the dread feeder expansion zone. Zara watched the tactical feeds from the bridge of the Profound Inquiry as Marcus provided real-time analysis of humanity's first combat encounter with their ancient enemy in 8 centuries. Perseus 7 has a population of about 3,000 humans and, maybe 500 other species, Marcus explained as they monitored the long-range sensors. It's an asteroid mining facility, so they have heavy industrial equipment but minimal military hardware. Against an entity that destroyed entire fleets, Commander Thex observed grimly. Traditional fleets, Marcus corrected. Let's see how they handle miners who have been waiting 800 years for payback. The dread feeders approached Perseus 7 in the same pattern they had used throughout the galaxy. No visible ships, no detectable energy signatures, just a spreading zone of psychological interference that grew stronger as it moved toward the station. On most worlds, this invisible approach had caused panic and mass hysteria before the actual attack began. Zara monitored the communication channels from the mining station, expecting to hear the screams and terror that had characterized every other dread feeder encounter. Instead, she heard something unprecedented in galactic military history. "This is Perseus 7 control to all units," came a calm human voice. "Dread feeder entities detected on approach vector 27 Mark IV. Estimated contact in 40 minutes. All personnel to psychological warfare positions. Activate Protocol 777. Psychological warfare positions?" Commander Thex asked. Marcus was studying the tactical displays with intense concentration. Every human settlement has been preparing for this since the last war ended. they know exactly what to do. The communication channels from Perseus 7 continued to broadcast tactical updates, and Zara realized she was listening to something no galactic military academy had ever taught. The humans weren't just preparing to fight entities that fed on fear. They were preparing to weaponize their own psychological responses. Mining Team Alpha, report readiness for cognitive disruption protocol. Alpha Team ready. We have 47 humans in distributed positions throughout the asteroid field. Psychological state optimized for maximum aggressive response. Mining Team Beta, status report. Beta Team ready. 62 humans in defensive positions around station perimeter. Anger amplification techniques activated. Zara's translator was having difficulty with some of the terminology. Marcus, what are anger amplification techniques? Deliberate psychological preparation for combat against fear-feeding entities. The humans are artificially increasing their anger levels to provide maximum disruption to dread feeder energy consumption. They can control their emotional states that precisely? With 800 years of practice? Yes. On the tactical displays, the dread feeder presence approached Perseus 7 like a spreading darkness. Every other time this pattern had appeared, it had been followed by the complete psychological collapse of the defender populations. But, as the entities reached the outer edge of the human mining station, something unprecedented happened. The psychological interference pattern destabilized. Impossible, Commander Thex breathed, staring at the sensor readings. Marcus was smiling again, but, this time the expression carried pure savage satisfaction. No, Commander. This is exactly what we designed ourselves to do. The communication feeds from Perseus 7 became clearer as the human voices took on an edge of aggressive excitement rather than fear. Contact confirmed. We have dread feeder entities attempting to establish psychological feeding patterns. Response protocols are working perfectly. Team Alpha reporting successful cognitive disruption. Entities are unable to process our anger responses. Team Beta confirming psychological warfare effectiveness. Enemy feeding attempts are resulting in energy backlash. Zara watched the sensor data with growing amazement. Instead of the expanding wave of terror that had characterized every other dread feeder attack, she was seeing something that looked more like a psychological explosion. The entities were encountering human fear responses and being overloaded by the aggressive energy that came with them. They're winning, she said quietly. They're doing more than winning, Marcus corrected. They're starving the enemy to death. The tactical display showed the dread feeder presence beginning to contract rather than expand. For the first time in galactic history, the entities were withdrawing from an attack rather than continuing to feed and grow stronger. Perseus 7 control to all allied forces, came the triumphant human voice. We have achieved successful repulsion of dread feeder entities. Enemy forces are withdrawing. No human casualties. Repeat, no human casualties. Commander Thex stared at the displays in stunned silence. A civilian mining station just defeated entities that destroyed our most advanced military installations. Because they fought smart instead of fighting scared, Marcus explained. Dread feeders expect their victims to become more afraid as the situation gets worse. When humans get scared, we get angry. When we get angry, we get more dangerous. The more the entities tried to feed on human fear, the more aggressive energy they received in return. And that energy is harmful to them? It's like poison. Fear is a defensive emotion, which is what they evolved to consume. Anger is an aggressive emotion, which disrupts their feeding patterns and damages their energy matrix. The communication systems activated as reports began coming in from other human settlements throughout the sector. Every single engagement was following the same pattern. Dread feeder attacks that should have resulted in total population destruction were instead being repelled by civilian populations using psychological warfare techniques. New Terra Colony reporting complete victory over Dread feeder assault force. No casualties among human defenders. Asteroid Mining Complex 55 Charlie has successfully eliminated Dread feeder entities in their sector. Enemy forces destroyed rather than withdrawn. Research Station Beta 7 reports that dread feeder entities fled after encountering human psychological warfare protocols. Zara pulled up the tactical overview of the entire sector and felt her understanding of warfare itself fundamentally change. The red zones that had indicated dread feeder expansion were no longer expanding. In areas where they had encountered human populations, the red zones were actually shrinking. They're not just defending, she realized. They're pushing the entities back. Marcus nodded with fierce pride. Every human settlement becomes a fortress that the dread feeders can't approach. But, more than that, we become poison to them. Every time they try to feed on us, they get weaker instead of stronger. And, your people know this? Every human child learns the history. We know that dread feeders are vulnerable to aggressive psychological responses. We know that fear mixed with anger creates energy patterns they can't process. We know that the proper emotional state makes us lethal to them rather than vulnerable. Commander Thex was studying the expanding pattern of human victories across the tactical display. Human Marcus, your species is treating this invasion as a training exercise. Because it is. For 800 years, every human settlement has practiced these techniques. Every human child grows up learning how to fight fear-feeding entities. This isn't a desperate last stand for us. This is what we were made for. The communication arrays activated with an incoming transmission from Earth's Planetary Defense Command. Admiral Torres appeared on the main display, but now she was speaking from what appeared to be a military command center with dozens of officers working at tactical stations behind her. This is Admiral Torres with an update on Operation Dreadhunter. Human forces throughout the sector have achieved complete tactical success in all engagements with dread feeder entities. We are now transitioning from defensive to offensive operations. Offensive operations? Commander Thex asked. Marcus's smile became truly terrifying. We're not just going to repel them, Commander. We're going to hunt them down. Admiral Torres continued her transmission. Be advised that human military forces are implementing deep space pursuit protocols. We are tracking dread feeder retreat patterns and organizing systematic elimination operations. This will not be a defensive war. The tactical displays updated with new data as human ships began appearing throughout the sector. Not the desperate evacuation fleets that most species would have organized, but hunting packs designed for pursuit and elimination of fleeing enemies. Your military was already mobilized, Zara observed. Our military has been mobilized for 800 years, Marcus confirmed. We've been preparing for this exact scenario since the last war ended. Ships, weapons, tactics, personnel, everything specifically designed for fighting dread feeders. She watched as human forces began coordinating with other galactic military units, but the dynamic was completely reversed from what she had expected. Instead of galactic forces protecting human populations, human forces were organizing the defense of other species. Perseus 7 control to all allied vessels, came the mining station's voice. We are organizing protective formations for non-human populations in our sector. Human psychological warfare capabilities will provide defensive coverage while allied forces maintain traditional tactical roles. New Terra colony to galactic defense coordination. We are establishing refugee reception centers for species evacuating from dread feeder zones. Human psychological defenses will provide safe harbor while traditional military forces reorganize. Across the sector, the pattern repeated itself. Human settlements were becoming fortress points from which mixed species forces could operate safely. The psychological warfare techniques that made humans immune to dread feeder attacks also created safe zones where other species could function without being overwhelmed by terror. Your people are protecting everyone else, Zara said quietly. Marcus looked at her directly. Research specialist Zara, 800 years ago, we fought this war to protect ourselves. Now we're fighting it to protect everyone. Even species you'd never encountered before? Because they're sapient beings who deserve to exist without being consumed by cosmic predators. Marcus's expression grew serious. The dread feeders are one of the few truly evil entities in the universe. They exist only to cause suffering. Any species that fights them is our ally. Commander Thex was studying casualty reports from across the sector. Human Marcus, preliminary data indicates 0 human casualties from Dread Feeder encounters, while providing complete protection for Allied forces. This level of battlefield effectiveness is unprecedented. Because we're not fighting a new enemy, Commander. We're fighting an old one with 800 years of additional preparation. The communication systems activated with a priority transmission from the galactic core worlds. The face that appeared belonged to Chancellor Vex of the Galactic Council, speaking from the emergency session chamber. This is an official statement from the Galactic Council emergency session. We have received reports of human military effectiveness against Dread Feeder entities. The Council hereby authorizes full cooperation with Human Tactical Command for the duration of this crisis. Marcus straightened slightly. They're giving us operational command. Chancellor Vex continued. Human tactical doctrine will be implemented across all defensive operations. Human psychological warfare specialists will be attached to all galactic military units. This authorization supersedes all previous protocols. The transmission ended, leaving the command center in thoughtful silence. Zara realized she was witnessing something unprecedented in galactic history. An entire civilization turning to humanity not for rescue, but for leadership in a war that only humans knew how to fight. Marcus, she said quietly, when you were sleeping without cover in our observation chamber, you weren't just demonstrating fearless behavior. You were showing us what 800 years of evolution had created. A species that doesn't hide from cosmic nightmares, Marcus agreed. We hunt them instead. Outside the ship, the tide of war was turning. For the first time since the Dread Feeders had emerged from the void between galaxies, they were encountering something they couldn't feed on, couldn't terrify, couldn't consume. They were encountering humanity, and humanity had been waiting 8 centuries for this fight. 6 months after first contact with the Dread Feeders, Zara stood on the observation deck of the flagship Humanity's Answer, watching the final battle of the Second Dread War unfold in the space around the ancient entity's primary hive structure. What she witnessed would fundamentally change every species' understanding of what it meant to be human. The hive itself was a construct that defied conventional understanding of physics. A massive structure built from crystallized fear and suffering, it existed partially in normal space and partially in the psychological dimension where the Dread Feeders actually lived. Previous galactic military forces had been unable to even approach it without suffering complete mental breakdown. But, surrounding the hive, in perfect formation, floated the combined human battle fleet. 3,000 ships ranging from converted mining vessels to purpose-built dreadnoughts, all crewed by humans who had spent 800 years preparing for this moment. Tactical overview, research specialist Zara, Admiral Torres requested through the communication array. Zara had been assigned as the official galactic observer for the final operation, documenting humanity's military capabilities for the historical record. What she had recorded over the past 6 months would reshape galactic military doctrine forever. Admiral, human forces have achieved complete psychological dominance over the operational area, she reported. Dread Feeder entities are unable to maintain coherent form within the aggressive energy field generated by your fleet. Confirmed. All human vessels reporting optimal psychological warfare readiness. Enemy feeding attempts continue to result in catastrophic energy backlash. Marcus, now serving as the liaison between galactic forces and Human Tactical Command, stood beside Zara at the observation station. Over the past months, she had watched him transform from a captured research subject into something that could only be described as a weapon of war. His casual confidence had been replaced by focused intensity that seemed to radiate outward like heat from a forge. Marcus, she said quietly, your people are about to attempt something that every galactic military academy teaches is impossible. What's that? A direct assault on a Dread Feeder hive structure. The psychological radiation alone should cause instant madness in any approaching force. Marcus smiled, and, after 6 months of observing human military operations, Zara finally understood that the expression was indeed a threat display. Research specialist, you're still thinking about this in terms of traditional psychology. Humans don't go mad when we encounter pure terror. What do? We get inspired. The human fleet began its final approach toward the hive, and Zara watched her instruments register something that should have been impossible. Instead of the expanding waves of terror that emanated from the structure, she was detecting massive surges of aggressive energy radiating outward from the human ships. "They're not being affected by the psychological attack," she observed. "They're turning it into fuel. Every terror impulse the hive generates gets converted into battle fury," Marcus confirmed. "The more afraid they try to make us, the more dangerous we become." Through the tactical displays, she could see individual human ships as they entered the hive's terror field. Rather than turning back or suffering psychological breakdown, the vessels actually accelerated toward their targets. The crews were using the Dreadfeeder's own psychological weapons as motivation for more aggressive attacks. "Flagship Humanity's answer, this is mining vessel Terra's vengeance," came a voice over the communication arrays. "We are experiencing maximum terror bombardment from the hive structure. Converting to maximum aggressive response. Requesting permission to engage at close range. Permission granted, Terra's vengeance. Show them what 800 years of evolution created." Zara watched as the converted mining ship dove directly into the hive's defensive field, its industrial cutting lasers modified for military use. The psychological radiation that should have driven the crew insane was instead making them more effective warriors. "Impossible," she whispered. "Not impossible," Marcus corrected. "Inevitable. This is what happens when a predator species encounters cosmic bullies." Across the tactical display, the pattern repeated itself as human ships closed with the hive structure. Each vessel seemed to become more dangerous the closer it got to the source of pure terror. Rather than being overwhelmed by fear, the human crews were being energized by their own aggressive responses to it. "Admiral Torres to all units," came the fleet commander's voice. "Final assault phase is now active. Remember what they did to our ancestors. Remember the 40 billion humans who died fighting these entities. Make them pay for every single life." The response from 3,000 human ships was simultaneous and unified, for the fallen. Zara felt something cold run down her spine as she realized she was witnessing the culmination of 8 centuries of species-wide preparation. Every human in the fleet carried the genetic and cultural legacy of survivors who had fought the First War. They weren't just fighting to defend their territory. They were fighting to complete something their ancestors had started. The assault on the hive structure began in earnest, and Zara watched as human tactics proved devastatingly effective against entities that had dominated galactic warfare for months. Instead of trying to destroy the structure through conventional weapons, human forces were using psychological warfare techniques to disrupt the fear-based energy that held it together. "Engineering teams to the surface of the hive," Admiral Torres commanded. "Plant the resonance generators at the calculated positions." Acknowledged. Human engineering teams deploying to hive exterior. Zara watched in amazement as human engineers in environmental suits walked directly onto the surface of a structure made from crystallized terror. The psychological radiation that should have killed them instantly was being channeled into focused determination to complete their mission. "What are the resonance generators?" she asked Marcus. "Devices that broadcast human psychological patterns directly into the hive's energy matrix," he explained. "Concentrated anger, determination, and fearless aggression, all tuned to the specific frequencies that cause maximum disruption to Dreadfeeder neural networks. You're going to poison them with human emotions. We're going to show them what 800 years of evolution designed us to do to cosmic predators." The engineering teams completed their work and withdrew to safe distances. Across the fleet, human vessels moved into final position around the hive structure. Every ship was broadcasting maximum aggressive energy, creating a sphere of psychological radiation that was completely toxic to the Dreadfeeder entities. "Admiral Torres to all vessels," came the final command. "Activate resonance generators. Full power." The effect was immediate and devastating. The hive structure, which had existed by feeding on fear and terror, was suddenly flooded with pure human aggression and fearless determination. The crystallized fear that formed its foundation began to crack and shatter as it tried to process emotional energy it was never designed to consume. Zara's instruments registered the death screens of ancient entities that had terrorized the galaxy for countless millennia. But, where those screens should have induced madness in any sapient listener, the human crews seemed to find them satisfying. Target destruction confirmed, came reports from across the fleet. Hive structure is collapsing. Enemy entities are experiencing catastrophic system failure. All Dread Feeder signatures are going dark, Admiral Torres announced. Complete elimination of enemy presence confirmed. The ancient hive structure, which had existed for millions of years as a fortress of living nightmare, collapsed into fragments that dissolved into empty space. With its destruction, the last of the Dread Feeder entities died, their psychological energy matrices unable to survive without the fear they fed upon. Silence fell across the communication channels as 3,000 human ships watched the end of humanity's oldest enemy. Admiral Torres, to all human forces, came the quiet voice. The Dread War is over. The entities are extinct. Our ancestors can rest. The celebration that erupted across the fleet was unlike anything Zara had ever witnessed. Not just relief or victory, but the sound of a species that had finally completed something that had been driving them for 8 centuries. Marcus turned to her, and, for the first time since she had met him, his expression was completely peaceful. Research specialist Zara, do you understand now why humans sleep without cover? She thought about everything she had witnessed over the past months. The fearless preparations for war, the psychological techniques that turned terror into weapon fuel, the genetic and cultural legacy that had shaped humanity into something uniquely suited for fighting cosmic nightmares. Because nothing in the universe is more dangerous than you are, she said quietly. Because we learned a long time ago that the best defense isn't hiding from monsters in the dark. It's making sure the monsters are more afraid of us than we are of them. Admiral Torres's voice came over the communication arrays one final time. This is Admiral Torres to all galactic forces. The Dread Feeder threat has been permanently eliminated. Human forces are standing down to peacekeeping status. We look forward to returning to scientific cooperation and peaceful exploration with our galactic neighbors. But, even as she said it, Zara could see human ships already organizing into deep space patrol formations. The same psychological evolution that had allowed them to destroy the Dread Feeders would now be directed toward ensuring that no similar threat could emerge from the dark spaces between galaxies. You're not going back to being peaceful explorers, are you? She asked Marcus. We never stopped being peaceful explorers, he replied. We just happen to be very good at eliminating things that threaten peaceful exploration. 6 months later, Zara published her research findings in a paper that became required reading at every galactic military academy. Psychological Evolution in Homo sapiens, How 8 Centuries of Existential Warfare Created the Galaxy's Ultimate Predator Species. But, she always remembered the moment when she first watched Marcus sleep without cover in his holding cell, completely unafraid and utterly confident that nothing in the darkness posed a threat to him. She had thought she was observing a strange evolutionary quirk. In reality, she had been witnessing the result of 800 years of species-wide preparation for a war that finally ended with humanity standing victorious over the corpses of cosmic nightmares. The alien girl had stared in amazement as he slept without cover, not understanding that she was looking at evolution's perfect answer to the monsters that lurked in the dark spaces of the universe. And, now those monsters were extinct, eliminated by a species that had learned to sleep peacefully because they had become the most dangerous thing in the galaxy.